Right, well, good morning, everyone. It was interesting. I was in Auckland about 12 years ago, working in Auckland, and I really enjoyed the sort of interlude away. But when Auckland, sort of the whole new journey of bringing Auckland together appeared and looked as if it was going to be serious, it was just a thing I couldn't resist. If anyone had worked in Auckland, decade ago, 2 decades ago, will know the energy and a lot of the work that used to go in just internally within Auckland, and the opportunity to build Auckland into something, to unite it, was just something that I had to be part of. So I'm very pleased to be standing in front of you, and if it is depleted numbers, you probably looked at the thing and thought, oh no, we can skip him and we'll come in a bit morning tea. So, but anyway, I don't mind. What I would like to do just with you today is just very little bit talk about Auckland, just to put the context of where we are, and a bit about the operating model, and the main part of my presentation is about the challenges. So it's what we're doing with those challenges, but I suspect that our challenges are the same as everyone in this room. We're all facing the same issues, and the way we approach it, we can certainly learn from each other, and that's what Auckland is trying to do, is to collaborate as much as it can with the ministry, with neighbouring groups and with the sector generally, just to make sure that we move forward together. So just what I would like to cover is, first of all, a little bit of Auckland. I hate probability. When someone tells me there's a 1 in 2,000 chance that this is going to happen, or a 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 100, it's meaningless in some ways. So when I'm talking to people, I say, let's take your lifetime. So most of us expect to live 50 years, some of us a bit more than that. And what is the chance of things happening in Auckland? So we know we're going to get a tornado. We get about 20 a year. It's just we never see them because they're so small. But we do get them. So we're guaranteed you will have a tornado in your lifetime. Tsunamis. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of tsunami warnings. If when we get a weather warning, it says it's going to drizzle or it says there's going to be a storm, we know the difference. Here, we get told there's a tsunami warning and then 2 millimetres arrives, or one day 20 metres arrive, and yet it'll be the same word that we've used. So, but anyway, there's still a 49% chance in our lifetime we're going to have a damaging, tsunami. So that's quite high. Earthquake in Auckland. We're talking about one that will do damage to pre-76 buildings. Not like this building will still be standing in that 7% chance, but we still have a 7% chance that the brick masonry type of buildings will, have damage to them. Now, I'm ashamed to say that I buy a lotto ticket now and again, and yet I have got a greater odds of a volcano appearing in my garden than I have of winning that lotto ticket. So we actually do have quite a reasonable risk in Auckland that we will have a volcanic eruption. 5% in our lifetime is quite a high probability. So the context of it is that, to me, I was told Auckland's this very quiet place. Nothing really happens in Auckland. You don't really need civil defence in Auckland. Well, the science says differently, and our experience in the last year is different. Believe it or not, little old Auckland has been activated about 19 times. And that's not the little storm damages where we still get there on top of that. So we started off with exercises. So we made sure we wanted to be capable, have that capacity. So we had exercise prove it. We took part in the old Tongaroa. Before the Christmas, we had 2 exercises, and we took part in the international one, a week or 2 ago. But then nature thought it would help us along as well. So these aren't in chronological order, but we supported the September earthquake. We had a drought last summer, and obviously the more recent Rena grounding as well. We've had a number of people that have been helping there. We get involved in crisis management as well as civil defence. So we decided to demolish a heritage palace hotel. We supported Watercare when they had their gas explosion. We were heavily involved with the Rugby World Cup, and obviously the Maui gas pipeline. We helped with a little bit of the communication with that as well. From an activation point of view, we've had 2 lovely cyclones last year in January that damaged quite a number of properties for us and did quite a bit of, many millions of damage. Obviously the February Christchurch earthquake, we supported a lot of the people that came to Auckland and sent a lot of resources. I think at the peak we'd sent about 450 resources from Auckland that were helping, in Christchurch, either in Wellington or within Auckland or whatever. There's a huge effort that went on there. As I said, we've had 3 tsunamis where we've had to activate, and we've had 2 tornadoes. We had one in Albany with the fatality, plus during the Rugby World Cup we had a tornado in Avondale. So what that's done for us is that a lot of our theory has been tested in practice. So we have a philosophy that even if it takes longer, we learn from it. So, for instance, when we had the cyclones, our sit reps may not have gone out as quick as we'd have liked, but we trained people on how to do them. So by the time the second one came along, we were stronger. And that's the principle that we do, is that nothing is too small. We what I call overcook it, to make sure that we're constantly learning, constantly bearing that, learning and building that capacity and using these activations to help us to be able to do the big one that will come. Now, civil defence from Auckland's point of view, it's funny, I often we think of Auckland as big, but in geographical terms we're not. We're one of the smaller groups in the country. Certainly Northland, where I was from, a lot bigger area, and Canterbury sort of dwarfs a lot of it, especially when you include Chatham's, which is shown on this map. Someone from Chatham's, who can be nameless, was saying that we never show them on their map, you see, so I just thought I'd make sure that it was on this one. But the difference with Auckland is that we have a quarter of the population in that small area. So although geographically it's a lot easier for us, I find it very easy to move around Auckland. Half an hour drive, 3/4 an hour drive is nothing. If you're in Northland or in Canterbury or one of these other areas, you're talking about hours to get around. So Auckland, it's easy to travel around, but there's an awful lot more people that we've got to engage with, and that has its own problems in that what we do has to be that much bigger and cleverer in order to reach that kind of population. Geographically, we made the decision not to mirror the political boundaries. So although we have wards and local boards, we don't match them. We match the emergency services because they're our key stakeholders. So the 3 zones that the emergency services operate from is where we operate our zones from as well. Just a little bit about the model. The principles behind the structure. First of all, we do use comprehensive emergency management, covering the 4 Rs. We're extremely fortunate, and those of you who don't like what happened to Auckland, a year ago with the Unitary Council, from a civil defence point of view, it is by far the best model. We have 1 mayor, 1 CEO, 1 controller, and obviously alternates, and that means 1 ECC or 1, EOC, so that we have that 1 coordination centre. And then we support locally by deploying people to where they're needed, so they get tasked to support the local community. We have an establishment of 37 full-time equivalents, and at the moment we've got about 33, I think. We've got some vacancies there, and we have enough professional resources to manage the first shift, so that we are able to manage those small ones that I'm talking about generally from within our team, and we can develop those capabilities with it. We also work with the rest of the organisation, like the rest of you do, and we've got several hundred that we can draw on to help with the multiple shifts or to filling some gaps if people aren't available. We're an integrated model, so we do rural fire, civil defence, and we also have a science hazards team as well, with 2 in the department, so that we are self-contained. As I said, we response zones aligned to the emergency services. And what is probably unusual, although I know some other councils here do it as well, is that we do business continuity, crisis management and civil defence. So our relationships with the organisation is across everything. In other words, if there is an interruption to your business, we can help. So that's why with the Maui gas pipeline, it wasn't a traditional civil defence emergency, but it did cause quite disruption to business and to our own business units. And again, we were able to help a bit there with the coordination. The position of civil defence is part of the CEO's office, so I'm part of the leadership team for the council. So it has an extremely high profile, and we are totally supported by the mayor in what we do as well. So I just wanted to digress very slightly, and some of you may have heard me talking about this. The Civil Defence Act and the Local Government Act don't really help civil defence, unfortunately. And I think the monitoring and evaluation has shown that governance is an area that, as a sector, we don't always do as well, right, typically across the country. And it stems right from the Civil Defence Act and the Local Government Act. The Mayor is accountable for the community, so you can never take that away from them. The local authority CEO is responsible for the management of resources within that local authority. You can never take that away from them. And the Mayor and the Council sets the CEO's objectives. So right at the front, you've got a CEO who manages resources, very much controlled by the Mayor, who's accountable for their district or city. The accountability for the work programme, first of all, the CDAM group is ultimately responsible, KEG obviously in the detail, and they are accountable for the civil defence in your group. The CEOs are accountable for their own local authority business as usual, and also for delivering the civil defence work programme. But, of course, there's always going to be that conflict. So unless there is strong alignment, the CEO and the Mayor will always be tugging away from the group or from the KEG. So, and the other thing which confuses it a little bit more is the fact that there isn't a direct accountability between CDAM to the EMOs within the councils, because your CDAM group obviously has got a KEG reporting to it. Hopefully you've got CEOs on the KEG. You then usually have managers that the EMOs report to, but the managers aren't always on the KEG, nor are they always in that loop. So there's an awful lot of potential for the accountability to be weakened or to disappear. So that's the issue that's just fundamental from the Act. In Auckland, we have a dream, a total dream. We have a Mayor, Council, and the CDAM group is a committee of council, because we have one council. So there's a total alignment, council's objectives and the CDAM objectives. Even though police and fire are part of that group, they're totally aligned. KEG, we have a CEO who's the chair of the KEG. The controller, which is myself, is deputy chair of the KEG. I also manage the resources for civil defence, and I report directly to the CEO. So what it means is that the CDAM work programme is the CEO's objectives for CDAM, and if you work down the way, the CEO manages the controller, who's the recovery manager, and the manager also controls the civil defence resources, which is also the EMOs. So the EMO's objectives link straight through to the CEO, which links right through to the work programme. So what I would really say for other groups, and certainly Wellington and other, Hawke's Bay and other areas that are going through restructuring, my own observation of civil defence is that you've got the big focus has to be on the CDAM group and the local authorities becoming aligned. The work programme that KEG agrees must be incorporated into the CEO's objectives and the EMO's objectives. In other words, there's got to be an absolute total, it's got to be all aligned so that what the EMOs are doing is delivering on the work programme. Regardless of where resources are provided, there's got to be that clear accountability and communication. It doesn't really matter who owns the resources, but they've got to be together. And the other point is we've just got to accept that the Mayor will always be the spokesperson for what happens in their area. You can never ever take that away from them, regardless of what you think you can agree before. And the other point, which is probably a little bit more controversial, is that the CEOs will always manage their area and their resources in it. No amount of group or national really will take away the resources. The Act talks about controllers managing resources made available to them. The CEOs will still always be managing their resources. So we can achieve that, though, by making sure that what the group does is basically at the same time working for the local authorities, which in turn are working for the group. So this slide here, I think, is achievable. If you're a unitary council, it absolutely delivers it for you. But those groups who are going through change, my own observations are that sheet there, we just have to get right, or we're forever going to be wasting resources by going away. Right, just some of the challenges, and I'll quickly go through some of these and I'll dwell on some of them. I hate science, again, as a comment, in that we talk about let's look at a 100-year floodplain, or let's look at the worst probable tsunami inundation map. When we get a tsunami warning, they don't tell you this warning is now the 1 in 100 year tsunami for this particular bit of coastline. All we know is there's a certain size of wave coming to us, or there's a certain amount of 100 mil of rain is coming to us. So what we need from science is, when you have got 100 millimetre of rain coming to Auckland with its 250 odd catchments, then I need to know that which of the 3,000 properties which would be affected by that are going to flood, so that I can alert them and evacuate them to safety. It's irrelevant to me whether it's a 1 in 100 year, 1 in 200 year, or 1 in 500 year. All I need to know is that this rain or this tsunami is going to inundate this particular property. And so that's where a lot of our focus is. We're talking with NIWA, with all their supercomputers, where we want to be able to align weather warnings with all its intricacies of where it might hit to that specific catchment, so that we can in turn evacuate, or at least alert those people that things are happening. I know I'm probably not supported on this one, but I think that our tsunami warning for New Zealand, I think we probably should be investing in another Dark II buoy that will give us a bit more verification. Chatham Islands, and I've got to be very careful when I say this because I upset someone the last time, shouldn't be our early warning buoy system. I think we do need one that is further afield, that can basically verify what the threat is to New Zealand. We're doing a lot of work with evacuation planning, I think right across the country. The difference between evacuating, say, 10,000 people or 100,000 people is a huge impact to our economy and the future recovery of it. And we basically have to get our evacuation right. So again, if we have a tsunami warning, we want to know pretty as well as we safely can which areas should be evacuated without sort of overreacting to it. Communication. You may have seen that Auckland gets in the television, radio and paper probably a little bit more often than it used to, and this is a definite sort of reason and strategy for doing it. I firmly believe that civil defence, the brand, I know you can use different words, is they've got to trust us to know what to do, so that they will listen to us when we do tell them, and they also end up depending on us, so that we are the people they go to when something goes wrong. And whether that's the media, politician, businessman, we've got that professional competence that they automatically know that when we speak about something, it is there. There is huge challenges to us. We now have to communicate in real time, and the radio and papers have told us really within 4 minutes of an event they expect us to have a view on it. And that's huge challenges for us. With the social media that goes on, we just have to be ready to be able to comment on it. We cannot say an hour and a half later when we issue a press release that we are doing something. The media already have got it all over the world, and they're alive and well. So that's a huge challenge that we have to. So we do have to get better at direct communication with politicians, business managers, stakeholders and the media on that. And the only way we can do it is by building trust in smaller events. So we again have this overcooking in the sense that no event is too small. We build those relationships, we try and build that profile so that people associate us with the people who are helping, the people who are managing and coordinating. And I would urge everyone in this room to have that same approach. We have to lift the profile of civil defence emergency management, but we've got to do it in a way that builds trust so that the community will listen to us when we do need them to do it. Real-time information sharing. The EMIS, I'm absolutely, totally supportive of what we're doing with that. I think as a sector, we need to get behind it and really put in resources to it. My concern is that a year from now we will have an expensive situation report sharer, and it would be a shame that we've put all the money and effort that's gone into it if all we can deliver is putting a few bits of paper out on a situation report with a map. So I think everyone here has to really get into it, put resources to it, and let's change the way we do civil defence so that we are sharing information real time and using the disciplines that certainly EMS brings to us. In Auckland, we've adopted ReadyNet. Again, I think ReadyNet supports what EMAS is trying to achieve, and it certainly gives a really good platform to emergency services and schools and those critical facilities, and we're also going to be using it for neighbourhood response plans to be able to communicate and to share damage and status for what's going on in the network. Public alerting systems, my biggest nightmare is very similar to what nearly happened with the exercise, a close tsunami where we, in theory and then legally and morally, we should have notified our community and got them to safety, but we've only literally got a couple of hours or 3 hours to do it in, and that stretches us, certainly for larger populations. So we have to get better at public alerting systems so that we can alert the public to give them the opportunity to be able to get to safety quickly. And again, we're doing a joint project with the ministry to try and further that work that was done before, now that technology's moved a bit, to make sure that we can get those mechanisms in place. So again, what we will do is in Auckland, but it'll be shared and hopefully help the rest of the country to move forward in that area. Building community resilience. The get ready, get through. It may be sort of old-fashioned in the sense that it's been around for a while, but it absolutely is the right message, and what we're trying to do is target that information in different formats for different people. So I think you've got a DVD which was produced, which we use for a certain audience. We've obviously worked with the ministry when we got the Turtle Safe refreshed, and we've invested in e-learning and webinars, which we're going to start launching ways of people to get familiar and get that message through using the internet. We still pursue the traditional ones, so we'll be in the Santa Parade, the Farmers Santa Parade or whatever it's called. We'll have a float and we'll be down there this year, and in some of our other Santa Parades in the region. We go to trade shows, we go to conferences, schools, universities, and we talk around volunteer organisations. So again, the traditional face-to-face we're continuing with, as well as pursuing the electronic side of things. Neighbourhood response plans, or community response plans, we just call them neighbourhood because in a more urban area, people think of them more as neighbours than communities. We've made good progress with what I'd call isolated communities. We've got about 20 neighbourhood response plans that are virtually complete and will be complete in a few months' time. We're moving on to the tower blocks. We believe that they're communities, so we're developing a mechanism where we can, basically they will have a plan. So you can have 600 people out in one building, and again, that's a community. So we're working on how we can make them more resilient. What we've realised with the vulnerable communities is that it's very difficult to define a community in a geographical one, and certainly to try and reach them. But the organisations who work with those groups, we're targeting them, and we've got a project that we're working with those associations so that we can get at those vulnerable groups in all its forms and be able to make them more resilient. In some of the bigger areas, we will rely on public education. You won't be able to define a geography area or a sector area. You'll just have to rely on more of a broader message to try and help them be resilient. So the neighbourhood response plans is not just one template. It sort of is a sort of progression across the different forms that we'll be using. Business resilience is extremely important. Obviously, Auckland's economy impacts New Zealand in a big way. Business continuity planning, we've got a project which was funded from the Resilience Fund, which again we want to be able to share with the rest of the sector. Whatever we do has to be accessible, simple to use, and designed by small business. So we've got a team like with businesses that will be working with us to try and make a tool worthwhile. I think other countries like Canada and other ones have developed them. So again, we're looking at overseas examples, but it's really important that we make it easier for these small business groups. The larger ones have resources to do this sort of stuff. If you've only got 1, 2, 3, 4 people there, this is too hard. So again, we've got to make it easier for them so that they get this that bit stronger after emergency. Engineering lifelines. We're fortunate that we have a very good engineering lifelines group in Auckland, but again, I think to be fair, we got caught out with the gas in the sense that there's still what I call the working arrangements to manage when things start to go wrong. We're getting better at understanding it and understanding codependencies. But again, I think being the advocate for a risk for change is one that the civil defence sector could do a lot more on. I made a prediction when the Act came in, it would be like 2 generations or 6 years before we would be an active voice on what needs to be changed in other people's plans. I suspect we still may be 6 years away where we are a voice that is saying telecom or saying vector or saying whoever that you need more continuity. We do it in a sort of a political way, but I think in a real and analytical way of understanding the vulnerability to our community as a result of infrastructure and being a real advocate in those shareholders' meetings to get them to invest more, I think is an opportunity that we need to take, but I think it's still a few years away. Capacity. Building and maintaining a network of volunteers from what we call neighbourhood response plan areas. No amount of what we do as professional civil defence will ever take away what the community needs to do. Our number plank is still building resilience within our community, and we need individuals, families and neighbourhoods to be stronger. So building that network of volunteers, equipping them to think how they will manage when there is no help around is fundamental. We spend about 30% of our resources or time on that neighbourhood level, and that is probably not enough, but it's a big commitment that we do, and I would suspect that most of you will do the same or more because it's just so important to what we do. Having a well-established maintenance of sort of evacuation welfare centres is absolutely fundamental as well, and I think John will probably talk about Christchurch, but having that network of a really well-established places where the community can use, we've certainly identified, and we've got a network, and for instance in Rugby World Cup we enlarged it because we knew that transport would not be possible, buses wouldn't be possible, so everything had to be in walking distance. So we worked with a lot of other businesses and everyone else who had facilities that could be used to give us an even bigger network. That sort of infrastructure is so essential if the community are going to be able to organise themselves before emergency services can help. We're also taking advantage of the synergies between rural fire, response teams and other departments in council that have response capability. Again, we often still tend to be a little bit fragmented. Smaller councils do it naturally. They've got no choice. They have a person does most of those functions anyway. But in larger councils, the danger is that there's a lot of resources that aren't being able to tap off each other. So again, pollution control, harbour master, these sorts of departments, we're strengthening those relationships with them and working together. The big thing that we're also offering is professional development, not just for the civil defence people, but for the organisation. And again, disasters are no longer local. There is no such thing as a local disaster. We always help each other out, and it's been shown that internationally we help each other out. So the more we can know what people's capabilities are and make those competences transferable so that people can go to Tauranga and help with RENA or go wherever they need to go, the stronger we'll be as a sector. So again, the training that we're doing with people, we want it to be recognised so that it can be used elsewhere. Stakeholder networks. Traditionally, this is a thing that we take very seriously. So the emergency services, coordinating, committees and the hazardous substance ones, lifelines, welfare, rural fire, and the recovery forums where this is an area that we're working on, is establishing them pre-emergency so that we've got a strong recovery network of leaders in those different sectors. So again, making sure that all the organisations with capacity, we are talking to each other, have agreed what we can do so that when emergencies occur, we've got those relationships and got those arrangements in place. The last slide I'd just like to cover is basically the capacity. I think there's an old saying, you've got to be careful what you wish for. CDAM has wished for a higher prominence, a higher recognition of the work it does. Well, I think that's happened. You've got the professional controller emerging. You've already got a number now in the country, and traditionally that used to be a CEO's role. That was where we encouraged them to be. was that CEOs should be those controllers. Now we're also encouraging a professional controller. Now, a professional controller will have a high profile, and what's more, they'll be given resources. But the sting to that is that you're then competing for other value for money initiatives. There was a chair of KEG at a meeting we had in Wellington recently that was talking about the earthquake threat to its community. It's done the analysis, and only one person would die in an earthquake in that community. They're saying they would rather put money in road safety than in earthquake-proofing buildings. And you could say, well, that's a silly thing to say. But if you lift the profile of civil defence up to be equal with other professions, then that comes that trade-off. Where is the best value for money? So in Auckland sense, is it best value to have 35 people dedicated to civil defence, or is it better to put those millions in some other life-saving initiative as well? So I think we have, now that we've got what we wish for, which is lifting our profile, now we have to be a lot more sophisticated in demonstrating value for money, and that what we do is the right thing and does give, value for money. To do that, we've got to build the trust of the politicians. And again, it's a lot easier for CEO. If you're a CEO, you have that natural link with politicians. If you're a professional controller, you've got to make that link in a normal day-by-day life. So it's a lot more difficult than it is for being a CEO. The other thing which I'm probably concerned about at the moment is that there is no two disasters the same. I've been involved in quite a number of disasters in my lifetime. I was not been involved like John was with the Christchurch earthquake. Mine have been on a smaller scale, but every one was different. And I think the old sort of adage that you don't plan for the last disaster you've had, that is the thing that concerns me. I think as a sector, we were built on comprehensive emergency management. We were built on multi-hazards, and I think it's really important. The smaller ones, the middle ones, and the big ones are given equal attention. And that whatever we do, whether it's structure or capacity, has to be able to cope with all those sort of things that get thrown at us. So that means we've got to build staff competences. So we do really have to develop our sector so that they are able to manage that. And I think the model of using crisis management, business continuity, as well as civil defence, and it was making us relevant on our day-by-day business, as well as the disaster, will then put us in a position where we will be seen as the people to go to when disasters occur, and we'll be clearly seen that we're rising to the challenge that the community clearly expects us to do. Thank you.